AITA for not helping my sister, who became homeless right after giving birth to her baby with my soon-to-be ex-husband? It started with a confession. Jessica is pregnant. And it's mine. My sister and my husband. For a year. Behind my back. My entire world fell apart in a single night. But the real karma? That came later. Because Jessica thought she won. She thought she was getting her happily ever after. Instead, Mark lost his job. Jessica got abandoned. My mother tried guilt-tripping me into cleaning up the mess. And me? I did something they never expected. I walked away. Then, months later, Jessica showed up at my door, homeless, broke, and desperate. With the baby. She begged me to take her in. I took one slow sip of my coffee. And shut the door in her face. Because for once, their problems weren't mine. But that's not even the craziest part. You won't believe what happened next. Fire. It was a regular Tuesday night. One of those nights where nothing feels particularly special. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my heels, and was already fantasizing about taking off my bra and inhaling an entire pint of ice cream. I was in autopilot mode. So when Mark said, "We need to talk," I barely reacted. I sighed, rolling my shoulders. Can it wait? My feet are killing me. His face was pale. I frowned. Okay, weird. Mark wasn't the emotional type. This was the same man who once got into a car accident and called me from the scene like he was ordering a pizza. I dropped my bag on the counter and pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "All right," I said, resting my chin on my hand. "What's up?" I was expecting something mildly inconvenient, like he forgot to take out the trash or accidentally paid the electric bill twice. Instead, Mark swallowed hard. Jessica is pregnant. And it's mine. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then, I laughed. Because clearly, I misheard. Jessica? My sister? The same sister who crashed on our couch last year when she needed help getting back on her feet? No. No way. Mark's face didn't change. The air felt thick. Like the walls were closing in. My stomach dropped. I sat up straighter, my throat dry. Say that again. He exhaled, gripping the table like he needed to physically hold himself down. Jessica is pregnant, he repeated, voice small. And it's mine. This time, I didn't laugh. The world around me went silent. No hum of the fridge. No cars passing outside. Just the roaring sound of blood in my ears. I felt disconnected. Like I was watching this happen to someone else. I licked my lips. How long? Mark's jaw tensed. What? I swallowed. How long have you been screwing my sister? His face crumpled. Mark, I said, my voice eerily calm. Tell me. How long? He looked away. A year. A year. I shot to my feet so fast my chair nearly fell over. I wanted to throw up. You mean to tell me, I whispered, that for an entire goddamn year, you've been sleeping with my sister? Mark had the audacity to look ashamed. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. My hand tightened around the wine glass I was holding. He didn't mean for it to happen. So what? He tripped and fell into my sister's vagina. Something inside me snapped. Crash. The glass shattered against the wall 2 inches from his head. Mark flinched. He knew he messed up. He knew he had no way out of this. I pointed to the door. Get out. Wait, please. I grabbed a second glass. He ran. The front door slammed behind him. And just like that, my marriage was over. I woke up the next morning feeling like my body had been hit by a truck. My eyes were swollen from crying, my throat raw from screaming, and my head pounded from the rage-fueled wine I had downed the night before. I stared at the ceiling, the previous night playing in my head on repeat. Mark. Jessica. A whole year. I felt numb. Then my phone buzzed. Jessica. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. Decline. 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 Then? My mom called. 6 times. By the 7th, I finally picked up. Sweetie, she said, her voice soft, like she was talking to a wounded animal. I know you're upset, but... Click. I hung up. Because there is no but. Jessica didn't accidentally sleep with my husband. She didn't accidentally keep it going for a year. She didn't accidentally get pregnant. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated betrayal. And I had nothing to say to her. Day 3, the guilt-tripping begins. Mom called again. I answered this time. Not because I wanted to hear her excuses, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. She's your sister, Mom started, as if that meant something. She made a mistake, but she's having a baby. She needs support. I clenched my jaw. There it was. The classic family guilt trip. Jessica wasn't the villain, she was the poor, helpless, pregnant woman. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, I bet she needs support. Mom sighed. You're making this into such a big deal. It's not like they planned this. I nearly dropped the phone. Not like they planned this? So you think it just happened? I snapped. You think she just tripped and fell onto my husband's dick? Watch your tone, she scolded, like I was a child acting out. I saw red. My tone? I shouted. Jessica ruined my marriage, and you're worried about my tone? Mom sighed again. It's not as black and white as you think. Relationships are complicated, honey. I barked out a laugh. Oh, please. If the roles were reversed, if I had slept with her husband, would you be this forgiving? Silence. Then, weakly, that's different. There it was. Jessica was the favorite. The baby of the family. The one who could do no wrong. I gritted my teeth. You picked your side, Mom. She gasped. That's not true. I smiled. Cold. Sharp. Final. It is, I said. And now? You can live with it. Then I hung up. Day 5, Dad's take. Dad called. Unlike Mom, he didn't sugarcoat. Jessica messed up, he said bluntly. I told her that. What she did to you was cruel. I swallowed. Of all people, I hadn't expected him to take my side. But then, she still needs help, though. She's pregnant. And Mark. I scoffed. Mark's a coward. Dad sighed. Yeah. And she's an idiot for trusting him. But, kiddo. I knew what was coming. But she's still your sister. I closed my eyes. Counted to 5. Then, calmly, I said. No, Dad. She's not. Because sisters don't do this to each other. Day 7, the last straw. I hadn't spoken to Jessica. Not once. Then? She sent me a text. A single sentence. I miss you. I stared at my screen, disgusted. Miss me? Like she hadn't completely destroyed my life? Like she hadn't made the single worst decision possible and then expected me to be okay with it? I typed back. Lose my number. Then? I blocked her. Because I didn't ruin her life. She ruined mine. Jessica thought she won. She thought she had it all figured out. She moved in with Mark like a happily engaged couple, playing house in a cute little rental apartment. She probably pictured a future where they raised their adorable baby together, where she got to be the glowing new mom while I faded into the background. I could just imagine her smug little smile, thinking she had stolen my life. Well, that lasted about 3 months. Because then, Mark lost his job. It started with a single, pathetic text from Jessica. "Jessica, hey, can we talk?" I stared at my phone. 3 months of radio silence and now she wanted to talk. I didn't reply. Instead, I sipped my coffee and went about my beautifully drama-free day. But then, Mom called. And that? That was interesting. I let it ring a few times before answering, already bracing for whatever nonsense was about to come out of her mouth. "Jessica's really struggling, sweetie." Oh. Oh, this was going to be fun. I smiled. Good. Silence. Then, a gasp. Like I had just slapped her through the phone. "How could you say that?" she demanded, voice dripping with shock and fake outrage. I leaned back on my couch, completely unbothered. "I don't know, Mom," I said, tapping my fingers against my mug. It was actually pretty easy. She made an offended noise. "She's going through so much right now," she tried again, her voice softer, like she was speaking to a child throwing a tantrum. Oh, I was about to have fun with this. "Is she?" I said, pretending to be shocked. "Wow. It's almost like she made a terrible decision and now has to deal with the consequences." Mom sighed. The deep, dramatic, tired mother sigh she always used when she wanted me to be the bigger person. "She didn't mean for this to happen," she said. I rolled my eyes. "Let me guess. Mark's being an asshole?" Mom hesitated. Bingo. She didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to say the words out loud. But I knew. Mark losing his job. That was bad. But Mark losing his job and realizing he now had to support an entire family? Worse. Because Mark was not built for that. Jessica had played house with him when things were easy. When they had money. When they could go on cute little date nights and pretend everything was perfect. But now? Mark was broke. And turns out, he sucks at being broke. I imagined the fights. Jessica, crying, screaming about how she was pregnant and needed support. Mark, snapping back, furious and frustrated, blaming the economy, blaming her, blaming anything but himself. It must have been deliciously awful. Mom was still talking. "She's so stressed, sweetie. You have no idea." I cut her off. "Mom, let me make this easy for you," I said, voice bored. "I don't care. How can you be so heartless?" she snapped. I laughed. "Heartless?" I repeated. No. You see, heartless was Jessica climbing into bed with my husband while smiling in my face. Mom winced. "But me?" I continued. "I'm just done." Mom huffed. "I thought you'd at least be mature about this." I hung up. Because I didn't need to hear the rest. Jessica made her bed. Now she could lie in it. It was a Saturday morning. I had plans. A slow morning with coffee, a good book, and the peace of knowing that my life was finally my own. Then my doorbell rang. I frowned, glancing at my phone. I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, but mostly annoyed, I padded to the door, coffee still in hand. And when I opened it? Jessica. Pregnant. Crying. Standing on my doorstep like some tragic heroine in a soap opera. I had to physically stop myself from laughing. She clutched her stomach, her face red and splotchy from what I assumed was either real crying or an attempt at manipulation. Probably both. "Please," she whispered. "I don't have anyone else." I tilted my head. You had someone else, I said flatly. Remember? My husband? She flinched. I stared at her, really looked at her. Jessica had always been the pretty one growing up. The one who got attention without even trying. The one who always knew how to work a room, how to make people feel sorry for her, how to get what she wanted. But now? Now, she looked exhausted. Her hair was unbrushed. Dark circles under her eyes. Clothes wrinkled, like she had been sleeping in them. And suddenly, I knew exactly what had happened. Mark was treating her like garbage. And Jessica wasn't built for that. She sniffled, lowering her gaze like she was a kicked puppy. Mark is being awful, she mumbled. He barely helps with anything. I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. A mistake? She nodded rapidly. I should have never, she swallowed. I should have never trusted him. I thought he'd be different. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the irony was killing me. You thought he'd be different? I repeated. Jessica, you saw firsthand what kind of man he was. You saw him lie to his wife. Cheat on her for a year. And you still thought, yes, this will end well? She sniffled again. I was stupid, she admitted. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Yeah, I said, shrugging. Well, that makes two of us. Jessica's lip trembled. For the briefest second, I thought she was about to apologize. But then? She switched tactics. Mom said you'd do this, she muttered, voice bitter now. She said you'd just gloat instead of helping me. I laughed again. Jessica, I said, I don't need to gloat. Your entire life is proof that I was right. She bristled. I just thought, her voice cracked. I just thought you wouldn't let me go through this alone. I tilted my head. Why? Her eyes darted up to mine. Why? I repeated, genuinely curious now. Why would you ever think I'd help you? Jessica swallowed. Because we're sisters. Oh. Oh, that was rich. I smiled sweetly. Sisters don't do what you did to me. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. Sisters don't sleep with each other's husbands. They don't lie for a year. They don't get pregnant and expect the person they betrayed to be their safety net. Jessica looked away. I was desperate, she whispered. I let out a slow breath. And now you're desperate again, I said, voice calm. And you still think I'm supposed to fix it for you. Jessica said nothing. She didn't have to. We both knew. Jessica had never known consequences. She'd always had Mom and Dad cleaning up her messes. Always had someone to fall back on. But now? Now she had run out of lifelines. Her golden parachute? Gone. And she hated it. Look, she said finally. I just need a place to stay for a little while. Just until I figure things out. Please. I stared at her for a moment. Then? I smiled. Nope. And then? I shut the door in her face. Jessica had the baby. I knew because Mom sent me a picture. A text. Just the image. No words. I barely glanced at it before deleting it. Because what was I supposed to feel? Joy? No. Relief? Not even close. Closure? Maybe. But not the kind they were hoping for. That baby wasn't my niece or nephew. It was the living, breathing proof of my husband's betrayal. A permanent scar in the form of a newborn. I stared at my phone for a second longer. Then I put it down, stretched, and went on with my day. Because that baby? Not my problem. But then? 2 days later. Mark bailed. 2 days. After she gave birth. Apparently, He couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle the crying. The diapers. The reality of what he had actually signed up for. He lasted exactly 48 hours before vanishing. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. Jessica woke up in a hospital bed, sore, exhausted, and suddenly very, very alone. And I couldn't stop laughing. Because this is what she wanted. She spent a year sneaking around behind my back, convinced that Mark was her soulmate. She broke apart a marriage thinking she was getting a happily ever after. But now? She was stuck. A single mom. No money. No job. A baby she wasn't prepared for. And the cherry on top? Mark had left her in a rental they couldn't afford. With no way to pay the bills. No savings. No plan. Jessica. Homeless. And who did she call? Me. I saw the phone ringing and just smiled. She let it go to voicemail. Waited 2 minutes. Then called again. I sipped my coffee, watching the screen light up with her name. Again. 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 I let them all go to voicemail. Because now she knew. She had burned every bridge. And she was finally, truly alone. Not my problem. It was a Friday morning. I was enjoying my coffee, wrapped in the comfort of my own space, scrolling through my phone like any normal person who wasn't dealing with a family-sized dumpster fire. And then? A knock. Not a polite knock. A desperate one. I sighed, setting my coffee down. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, there she was. Jessica. And this time, she brought the baby. I had never seen her like this. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was oily, thrown into a messy bun that was barely holding together. Her clothes were wrinkled and stained, like she had been wearing them for days. And the baby? Wrapped in a thin little blanket, resting against her chest, completely unaware that his mother's entire life had just collapsed. She knocked again, softer this time, like she was afraid I'd turn her away before she could even get a word out. I took a slow sip of my coffee, leaned against the doorframe, and waited. Jessica's lip quivered. Then she burst into tears. Please, she whispered. I have nowhere else to go. I raised an eyebrow. Nowhere else? Mom and Dad won't take me in, she continued, her voice cracking. Mark is gone. I don't even have money for a hotel. She sniffled, adjusting the baby in her arms. I just need somewhere to stay. I tilted my head. That sounds really hard. Jessica nodded frantically. It is. I took another slow sip of my coffee. Then I smiled. Not my problem. And closed the door. The second the door clicked shut, Jessica screamed. Not a normal scream. Not a mad scream. A full body, sobbing, defeated scream. She banged on the door. Please, she sobbed. I don't have anyone else. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. This should have felt worse. But it didn't. Because this was justice. For the lies. For the betrayal. For the months of pretending I didn't exist while she played house with my husband. She had everything she wanted. And now? She had to live with it. I turned the lock. Her sobs grew louder. But I didn't open the door. Not this time. Not ever. I knew the call was coming. After Jessica's dramatic doorstep meltdown, after she sobbed and screamed outside my apartment like a tragic heroine in a bad soap opera, I knew she'd run straight to Mom. And sure enough, 5 days later, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether I wanted to deal with this or not. But curiosity won. I answered. And the moment I did, Mom lost her mind. How can you be so heartless? No hello. No fake pleasantries. Just instant screaming. I held the phone away from my ear and took a sip of my coffee, waiting for the rant to finish. Mom wasn't even breathing between words. She is your sister. She has a baby. She has nowhere to go and you just left her outside like garbage? I sighed. Are you done? Mom ignored me. She's been crying for days, she continued. She's exhausted. She's scared. That baby has no home. She took a dramatic breath, then went for the kill shot. And you don't even care. I waited. Then, calmly, I said. Oh, so now you want me to care about family? Silence. Like real, thick, awkward silence. The kind that only happens when someone realizes they just walked into a trap. But I wasn't done. I leaned back in my chair, twirling my coffee mug in my hands. Where was this energy, I asked, voice smooth, when she was sleeping with my husband? Mom made a choking sound. But. Where was this energy, I continued, when you expected me to be the bigger person? More silence. And now? I was smiling. Because I had all the power now. For months, I had been the one begging for answers. The one crying over the betrayal. The one trying to understand how my family could just shrug at what Jessica had done to me. But now? Now they were the ones begging. Now they were the ones crying. And it felt good. I could practically hear Mom grasping for a way to spin this. She's still your sister, she tried. No matter what happened, she's still your blood. I snorted. Blood doesn't mean family, Mom. You taught me that. More silence. Then, in a voice so soft it almost made me laugh, she tried one last thing. She's sorry. Oh. Now she's sorry. Not when she was sneaking around behind my back. Not when she was laughing with Mark while lying to my face. Not when she was so sure she had won. But now? Now that her life was crumbling. Now that Mark had left her in the dirt. Now she's sorry. I let out a small, amused breath. You picked your favorite, I said simply. Mom stilled. You picked Jessica, I repeated, over and over again. Even when she destroyed my marriage. Even when she ruined my life. You still chose her. I let my words sink in. Now? You get to live with that choice. And then? I hung up. Because I had nothing left to say. It had been 100 days since I cut them off. 100 days since I stopped answering calls. 100 days since I stopped giving second chances. 100 days since I finally chose myself. And in that time, my life had never been better. My apartment was small. The furniture was cheap, a mix of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs from friends. My bed frame wobbled if I sat on it too fast. The couch cushions were lumpy. The kitchen light flickered sometimes, and I had to jiggle the handle on my toilet so it wouldn't run all night. But it was mine. I could wake up whenever I wanted. I could cook dinner without having to make extra for someone who didn't appreciate it. I could sit in absolute silence without hearing my mother's sighs, Jessica's whining, or Mark's excuses. It was peaceful. It was freedom. And most importantly, it was finally, completely, all about me. Meanwhile, Jessica, homeless. She had burned through every option. Mark was gone. Mom and Dad wouldn't take her in. She had no savings, no job, and, shockingly, no magical benefactor willing to clean up her mess for her. Her last desperate attempt? Me. And I had slammed the door right in her face. I hadn't heard from her since. Mark? Mia. After bailing on Jessica and the baby 2 days postpartum, he had basically vanished. Rumors were flying, Some people said he was crashing with a friend across town, others claimed he had moved out of state. I didn't know. And I didn't care. Because Mark was not my problem. Not anymore. Mom? Still pretending we were a family. She sent a few guilt-trip texts here and there. I just wish we could talk. I hate that this family is falling apart. No matter what happened, we're still blood. I ignored them all. Because she was the one who chose sides. And now? She could live with it. And then? Just when I thought my week couldn't get any better? Mark texted. I was sitting on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, halfway through a crime documentary when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another spam email or some random notification. Instead, his name. For a second, I just stared. Mark hadn't contacted me since the night he ran out of our marriage. And now? Now, after 100 days of blissful silence? Now he had something to say. I opened the message. 3 words. I miss you. I blinked. Then? I laughed. Like, really laughed. Because of course he missed me. Of course, he missed the woman who made his life easy. Of course, he missed the stability, the security, the person who actually gave a shit about him. And now, after burning every single bridge, he thought he could just crawl back. I exhaled, shaking my head. Then? I left him on read. Because for once, their problems weren't mine. And it was the best feeling in the world. It had been 150 days since I cut them off. Almost half a year since my life imploded in the most spectacularly awful yet karmically satisfying way possible. I had expected it to hurt longer. I thought I'd be haunted by it, by the betrayal, the rage, the sheer insanity of it all. But instead, I was flourishing. And them? Well, they were exactly where they deserved to be. I hadn't heard from Jessica since she stood on my doorstep, sobbing with a newborn in her arms. From what little I did hear through the family grapevine, she had bounced from couch to couch, staying with random friends or whatever poor soul took pity on her. She hadn't gotten a job. She hadn't figured anything out. She was just existing. Begging for help from anyone who would listen. But me? I didn't listen. She made her bed. Now she could lie in it. Mark was still missing in action. No one knew exactly where he was, but I had a good guess. He had always been the kind of man who ran from his problems. His credit card was probably maxed out from one too many fresh starts. Or, if karma was feeling particularly generous, maybe he was mooching off some new poor woman who didn't realize yet that he was an absolute parasite. Either way, not my problem. And Mom? Still trying. Every few weeks, she'd send a new guilt trip message. I hate that we aren't talking. I just wish we could be a family again. Can't we just move forward? I ignored every single one. Because the thing is, I did move forward. Just without them. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from my dad. Now, unlike Mom, Dad hadn't pushed me to forgive Jessica. He hadn't excused what she did. But he also hadn't exactly gone no contact either. So when he called, I actually answered. His voice was tired. Like a man who had spent the last few months watching everything fall apart in slow motion. You won't believe what happened, he said. I smirked. Try me. He let out a long sigh. Jessica moved back in with Mom. I snorted. Oh, that's rich. It gets worse. I leaned back on my couch, thoroughly entertained. Go on. Dad hesitated, but I could practically feel his second-hand embarrassment through the phone. She started seeing Mark again. I choked on my drink. What? Yup. I couldn't help it. I cackled. I mean, honestly. After everything? After he abandoned her 2 days after birth? After he left her broke, homeless, and desperate? She still took him back. I wiped a tear from my eye, catching my breath. You know what? That's perfect, I said. You're not even a little mad? Dad asked. I smiled. Mad? No. I think it's hilarious. Because now? I had absolute certainty that Jessica's life would never get better. She had been handed an escape route. A chance to rebuild. To take responsibility. To become something other than the selfish, entitled, home-wrecking disaster she had always been. And instead? She chose to go right back to the man who ruined her. That wasn't my karma to deal with anymore. That was hers. After I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment, smiling to myself. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The heartbreak. The anger. The years of being the afterthought in my own family. And now? Now I was free. Jessica was still chasing ghosts. Mark was still a worthless coward. Mom was still choosing Jessica over reality. And me? I was finally at peace. Because their self-inflicted chaos was no longer mine to fix. And that was the best feeling in the world. 200 days. It had been 200 days since I cut them off. 200 days since I stopped being the family doormat and started putting myself first. 200 days of silence. Peace. Freedom. I thought I was done. I thought they had finally given up. But then? Mom showed up. At my apartment. Uninvited. It was a Saturday morning. I had just gotten back from the gym, sweaty and exhausted, already dreaming about taking a hot shower and ordering takeout. Then? A knock. Not a desperate one, like Jessica's. Not a frantic one, like someone who had nowhere else to go. No. This one was sharp. Firm. Purposeful. I opened the door. And there she was. Mom. Dressed like she was going to church, clutching her purse like she was on a mission. I sighed. Nope. And started to close the door. She blocked it with her foot. We need to talk, she said. I crossed my arms. We really don't. She looked at me, her expression tired. Like a woman who had exhausted every other option. Jessica is pregnant again, she blurted out. I stared at her. Then I laughed. Really laughed. With Mark's kid? I asked, wiping away a tear. Mom hesitated. Which meant? Oh my God. I nearly bent over, cackling. Because this was a new level of stupid. Jessica, after everything, after being abandoned, humiliated, and left homeless, had still taken Mark back. And now? Now she was pregnant again. I don't know what you want me to say, I said, catching my breath. Mom sighed. I just want my daughters back. I raised an eyebrow. Daughters? She shifted uncomfortably. This has gone on long enough. Jessica needs you. The baby. I held up a hand. No, I said. Jessica doesn't need me. Jessica needs a therapist. And a financial advisor. And a reality check. Mom looked like she was about to cry. You used to care, she whispered. I let out a slow breath, staring at her. You're right, I said softly. I used to care. But you made it very clear who mattered in this family. And it wasn't me. She swallowed. That's not true. I tilted my head. Isn't it? I let her sit in that. Let her think about all the times she chose Jessica. Every excuse she made for her. Every time she ignored what she did to me. Every time she guilt-tripped me instead of holding Jessica accountable. I took a deep breath. I need you to hear this, Mom, I said. And I need you to really, truly understand it. She nodded slowly. I am never coming back, I said. Mom flinched. I am never forgiving Jessica, I continued. I am never going to be the good sister and help her out, because she made her choices. Just like you did. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, she whispered. I shook my head. No, I said firmly. This is your problem now. Not mine. And then? I closed the door. For the last time. I leaned against the door for a second, taking a deep breath. And in that moment, I realized something. I felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. No guilt. Just relief. Because for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free.